You boys be quiet down there!
Here at Basement Brothers, we're all about classic Japanese games from the 80s and 90s. But as an unapologetic Falcom fanboy, I have from time to time made a short video about one of their brand new games. Just last Thursday, on the 30th of September 2021, the newest game in the Legend of Heroes series was released for the PS4 in Japan. Kuro no Kiseki begins a whole new arc in the Trails series, taking place in the country of Calvard, the land often mentioned but never visited previously in the series. Are you ready for all new adventures in Zemuria, the world of Falcom's Trails series? Because I sure am. First off, to be clear, I'm currently only on Chapter 4 of the game, so this won't be a definitive review. This also isn't intended to be a spoilers video. I'm going to be introducing each of the characters and talking about the basic plot later on, but won't give away any information that I feel would spoil the plot of the game for Trails fans who are anxiously waiting for this game to be released in English. Before any of that though, let's talk about the game system. This is the first time in the Trails series that the battle system has been completely changed. Though there have been gradual changes, it was always the same system at its core. The biggest change is that for most battles you can choose to play this game as an action RPG. Approaching enemies on the field allows you to attack them and continue attacking until they are defeated. At first glance, the gameplay resembles that of Ys or Tokyo Xanadu, but don't be fooled, this is no Ys. The field battles, as I call them, are extremely simple and there isn't any strategy other than attack, dodge, and charge attack. The enemies become temporarily stunned after they take a certain amount of hits, and this is your chance to inflict heavy damage. That's unfortunately all there is to it. Unlike Ys, there aren't certain characters who are strong against certain enemies, which would add another layer of complexity. In order to take advantage of things like elemental weaknesses, you need to change over to command battle, or shard battle as the game calls it, at any time by pressing square. The other way a command battle can begin is when one of the enemies telegraphs one of these big red attacks. If you are unfortunate enough to get hit by one of these, you are forced into a command battle where you will start with a huge disadvantage. The game transitions smoothly into a turn-based battle system. The system here controls very differently from the previous games, but gives a very similar end result. You can move characters around freely when it's their turn, but the maximum distance you can move is still limited like it was in previous games. Positioning is even more important here, since the link attacks are executed by placing your character nearby another one, so that these circles appear around them. Another major change is that the attack order display is now separated into the player characters on one side and enemies on the other, making it much harder to see the exact order your turns will occur in relation to your enemies. There's a boost gauge in the bottom left corner that gradually builds up, which you can use at any time to get a boost to your character's attack, arts, etc. Arts and crafts are executed pretty similarly to how they were before, except now S-crafts require you to use 2 bars of the boost gauge before they can be executed at all, making it much harder to simply spam S-crafts. S-craft animations are also much shorter in this game, which I like. They were getting kind of out of hand in previous games. The battle animations also can't be skipped in this one, at least not currently during the first playthrough of the game. Bosses and other battles which occur during the story scenes have to be fought using command battles, but with normal enemy encounters you have the option to just take them out on the field instead. So if for some reason you're allergic to action games, you can choose to play this game completely as a turn-based RPG. But here's the thing, taking the enemies out using the field battles is almost always faster, and if you're good at dodging you can easily avoid taking much damage rather than relying on the random number generator of the command battles. This is why I almost always choose field battles when I can. On the other hand, like I said before, the field battles are super simple, so I always feel like I'm missing out on some of the more interesting aspects of the game by not using the command battles very much. Plus, the command battles give more chances to obtain experience bonuses depending on how you perform. The way the game actually wants you to play is by stunning the enemies in the field and then switching to command battle while they're stunned, in order to begin with a play advantage. But even in this case, I find that it's still faster to take them out on the field. So I always feel like I'm kind of missing out on something, no matter which way I choose to take out the enemies. More choice is not always a good thing. In future installments, I'd like to see the field battles made more interesting by adding status ailments and such. But that probably still wouldn't give me much reason to use the command battles more, so I'm not sure if there's any perfect solution. Overall, I have to say that the new battle system is really interesting and innovative, but not especially satisfying, at least not in its current state. Another area where the game has been majorly redesigned is the menus. Navigation requires you to press certain buttons on certain screens. Some operations are buried pretty deep and can be hard to find, at least at first. Even having played as long as I have, I still often need to look at the guide on the bottom left in order to navigate. The new menus work, and it's not that I'm against change, but I feel like this is an area where they simply tried to make things different for the sake of being different. It's not always necessary to reinvent the wheel, and there is something to be said for the simpler menus used in the earlier games. So in order to talk about the rest of the aspects of the game, I'm going to need to talk about the story and characters. Our protagonist in Kuro no Kiseki is Van Arkwright, who owns Arkwright Solutions Office, which is only for the customer in complicated matter. Oh wait, they fixed it before releasing the game? At least it's grammatically correct now, I guess. What it means is that Van takes jobs where the client, for whatever reason, can't go to the police or the Bracers, the group of community adventurers from the Trails in the Sky games. In practice, Van operates like a private detective who also kicks ass when the job requires it. There seems to have been an attempt here to make the series more mature now that its fans are older. I noticed a bit more blood and violent themes in the story this time, and Van has interests very similar to those of a stereotypical middle-aged Japanese man. He loves a good bath at the bathhouse, catching a movie at the theater, and is a bit of a foodie, especially when it comes to sweets. He's also into cars. His pride and joy is his blue pickup, which although he bought used, he has spent a lot of time customizing. Don't you dare say anything bad about Van's pickup. Did I mention he bought it used? That's one fact the game makes sure you are aware of.
I got it at a very good price. I paid cash. My cousin Prince Murray has a dealership in the valley. He was very nice to me.
We get the idea.
Since Van acts and talks so much like he's middle-aged, some of the characters like to call him Old Man, though as Van will often point out, in reality he's only 24 years old. Guess they didn't quite have the courage to make a JRPG where the protagonist is actually 44 rather than 24. Even with attempts to mature the series, such as adding a good and evil alignment system based on your decisions in the quests, overall the game maintains the simple lighthearted sense of morality that Trails is known for. Van lives in Edith, the capital of the Republic of Calvard. The city is by far the most modern we've ever seen in the series, and similar to the real world. Though we've seen some pretty large and modern cities in the previous games, this is the first one that's had a movie theater, and cafes that really do look like Starbucks. We also see real highways in the series for the first time, and even the cars now look more or less like real ones. I know it's been a long time since the Trails series added the internet and cell phones, but I can't help but miss the steampunk world of Trails in the Sky. At this point, this game had might as well just take place in the real world instead of a fictional one. Sometimes it's hard to tell whether I'm playing a Trails game or Tokyo Xanadu 2. The game reminds me a lot of Tokyo Xanadu, in fact. The first half of each chapter takes place in the huge city of Edith, which is comprised of a number of separate areas connected via menus. While this is nothing new to the Trails series either, it resembles the city in Tokyo Xanadu most closely. As in that game, you'll explore the city in each chapter, observing the changes to the characters and items available for sale. As usual, there's a huge variety of food available, but this is the first game where I actually felt the need to purchase all of it. Whenever you eat a new food for the first time, you are awarded gourmet points, and when your gourmet level goes up, you get an actual useful boost to your entire party's stats. You might be surprised then that the cooking system has been made far simpler in this one. This shifts the focus more toward buying food rather than making it. The movie theater in the city is used for inviting other characters to see a movie with Van, which increases their bonding points. Yes, this game has bonding points and events, like the previous games. These have proven to be sort of divisive among the fan community from what I've observed, but, well, here they are again, like them or not. So maybe it's about time I talked about Van's companions. The first character who joins Arkwright Solutions' office is Agnès Claudel, a 16-year-old high school student in Edith. She isn't a confident fighter, but does her best to support the party primarily through arts abilities. She comes to Van seeking his help to find a set of 8 orb mints left by her great-grandfather. These Genesis orb mints are the MacGuffin of the game, and as far as I can tell, you obtain one of these at the end of each chapter, including the prelude. They possess mysterious powers, such as the ability to resurrect the dead as zombies. The next character is Ferdi Al-Fayed, a member of a Jaeger Corps group much like Fee in Trails of Cold Steel. She's only 13 years old and is anxious to become a strong warrior. Since she grew up as part of a traveling mercenary group, she often plays the part of the fish out of water in the city. She at least knows what things like cars and movies are, but occasionally some of the modern devices and concepts go a bit over her head.
What in tarnation's a skyscraper?
It's a very tall building, Mr. Clampett.
What in tarnation's a building?
It's a structure where people live or work. With all your money, you could easily erect one.
What in tarnation's a...
Then we have Aaron Wei, a stage performer and dancer in the Chinatown district of the second largest city in Calvard. His local popularity has made him quite vain, but nonetheless he is an extremely competent fighter. His personality clashes a lot with Van's, yet the two of them seem to have a high respect for each other's fighting ability, creating a dynamic of unspoken trust between them. Next is Rosette Twinings. Although she looks like a maid-type character, she is actually an employee of the company that makes Van's AI assistant named Mare. Rosette is also a strong fighter, who joins Van's party in order to provide, after-sales service? You see, Van's AI assistant in his Zypha, which is what they call the smartphones in this game, has been acting a bit strangely. When Van is in a pinch, Mare suddenly develops a personality of her own and allows Van to transform into a sort of superhuman monster. It's a pretty weird concept, but basically this is here to replace the robot battles of the previous games. Another main character is Judith Ranster,
the movie star,
who apparently can also fight, and joins Van's party. There are two more main characters who I haven't even met yet. The first is Quattro Salizione, a 15-year-old scientist who creates orbital drones, and a mysterious 69-year-old man who goes by the pseudonym of Burgard Zeman. I'm actually really interested to see how a 69-year-old works as one of the major characters of the game. If he appears in the sequels, he'll probably be in his 70s. How about returning characters? I'll just mention them briefly and try to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. Being a native of Calvard, of course Zin from Trails in the Sky makes an appearance, as well as Kirika. There's also Ren, who is now a high school student and goes to the same school as Anies. Fee from Cold Steel is here and Edith as well, but I won't say why. Also Cao Li from Crossbill, along with, well, you either know who this is or you don't. Finally, Walter from Ouroboros makes a few appearances too. There are probably more returning characters who appear later, but these are all I've noticed so far. The game is structured similarly to Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 3. The first part of each chapter takes place in the main city of the game, while the second part takes you on a short trip to a different region of Calvard. While this is exactly what I was expecting from this game, I have to admit I always find the first part of each chapter to be a bit tedious. The plot grinds to a near halt while you spend a free day roaming the city, completing optional quests, shopping for new food, etc. We can expect that the next game will be more similar to Cold Steel 2 and 4, where we can roam more freely about the areas introduced in the previous game, as well as a few new areas. The Republic of Calvard is the most culturally and geographically diverse country to appear in the series yet. You have the Chinatown of Langport in the south. There's a really cool dungeon here based on the famous Kowloon walled city. Anyone up for some urban exploration? Then you have the desert oasis of Tharbad, based on the Middle East. You'll explore vast deserts and sample Middle Eastern cuisine, all while listening to a soundtrack featuring a bit of exotic flavor. Let's talk about the game's soundtrack while we're at it. While the diverse locations of the game make for a few tracks with thematic variety, most of them are exactly what you would expect. Some of the new tracks, such as the battle and city BGMs in Edith, sound almost like tracks straight out of previous games. In fact, there are at least a couple of literally reused tracks, though they appear only briefly. The reused church BGM bothers me the most. This comes on every time you enter one of the game's many churches, and really sticks out for me. Ideally, every brand new arc in the Trails series should have all new music, in my opinion. Kuro no Kiseki is the first game to use Falcom's new original game engine. Overall, I would say it is an improvement over the Fire engine used in the previous Trails games. Characters follow you around like they did in Ys 9, and buildings are now an integral part of the city areas, meaning that there's no loading transition screen when you enter or exit a building, which feels much smoother. The new engine also seems to allow for more realistic character movement. However, I wouldn't say that everything looks amazing either. Check out some of the shadows during the nighttime scenes. Oh man, that looks bad. You don't even have to look this closely to see it. By the way, although this game is currently a PS4 exclusive, the footage you are seeing was all captured on a PS5 running at 1080p. I tried running it on my original PS4 as well for comparison, and the biggest difference I could notice was the loading time, though the PS5's SSD doesn't make quite as much of a difference as I'd hoped. As for frame rates, looks like the game is probably locked at 30 FPS. Judge for yourself. So what do I think of Kuro no Kiseki overall? Well, I have to admit I wasn't exactly on the edge of my seat throughout the prelude in most of Chapter 1. I hope that newcomers to the series aren't as bored with it as I was, or they might just put it down before it gets any good, which would be a shame. This game, being the start of a brand new arc with new characters, should serve as the first good entry point to the series in a long time. But as I alluded to earlier, the game started to grow on me with time. When I finally got to the second half of Chapter 1 and got to explore a much smaller town with a nice little field full of enemies, I felt much more at home. Call me old-fashioned, but I still prefer more traditional JRPGs with small villages and simple areas to explore. These big cities are too much for me.
What in tarnation's a building?
Yeah, me too.
The fact that I'm a bit old school might also be why I feel an affinity for Van and his middle-aged personality. It's fortunate for me that the main protagonist happens to be my favorite character. The game gives very little background information on Van, and it's obvious that his past will play a significant role in the story later. Some of the other main characters, who I will not name, I am not so fond of. But as always, characters tend to grow on you when you spend a lot of time with them in a long game like this one. Will Kuro no Kiseki become a beloved series like Trails of Cold Steel was? At this point, I kind of doubt it will quite reach the same level of fandom, but hope I'm wrong. I guess we'll just have to wait and find out. So thanks for sticking around to hear my early thoughts about this game. If you like this sort of video format and want to find out more about Falcom, then definitely click on our channel for our other videos. I made a lot of videos related to Falcom games over the years, including both their newest and some much older titles like the very first Legend of Heroes game, for instance. I plan on continuing to make more Falcom related videos in the future, so to make sure you don't miss them, please subscribe to the channel. This has been Mr. Jakes from Basement Brothers.